My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the vial. In my palms, a cure for the man who hated me more than anything. My name is Jane, and I'm a healer. The irony was not lost on me. I watched from the edge of the forest as his pack, the Red Claw pack, celebrated loud, boisterous, alive. And then there was him. Luther. The Alpha. A phantom of a man, his presence a ghost at his own celebration. He was cold, unfeeling, and he never smiled. They said it was a curse, and they were right. A curse that had sealed his heart. A curse my family created. A decade ago, my family, a group of powerful, rogue healers, was hunted down by the Red Claw pack for our magic. The Alpha at the time, Luther's father, was a cruel, merciless man. He wiped out my entire lineage. I was just a child. I remember the smell of blood and fear, the screams echoing in the silent night. I remember my mother's eyes, filled with a power I didn't yet understand, as she looked at me one last time. In a final, desperate act of vengeance, with her dying breath, she placed a curse on his son, a curse that would take away everything he held dear. Every emotion, every feeling, every memory of love. Now, as I stood here with the cure in my hands, a cure I'd spent my entire life perfecting, I felt a lump in my throat. I was the last of my kind. I'd been living in the shadows, hunted by both my own kind, for my mother's betrayal, and the pack, for our powers. I owed him nothing. But every time I saw his dead eyes, a part of me, the healer part, felt an ache. A deep, soulful ache that whispered of what could have been. I'd come here to offer him the cure, to end the curse that had not only taken his emotions but had left a hollow space inside me. It was my family's legacy, and I had to end it. I moved into the shadows, a lone figure in a world of light, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I moved from tree to tree, my senses on high alert. The sounds of the celebration, music, laughter, the rhythmic thud of dancing feet, grew louder. The air was thick with the scent of pine, roasted meat, and the earthy musk of dozens of werewolves. The Red Claw pack was a force to be reckoned with, a tight-knit community with a fierce loyalty to their alpha. A loyalty he couldn't feel. I saw him then, standing at the edge of the firelight. He was even more imposing up close, a tower of muscle and hard angles. His black hair was a stark contrast to his pale skin, and his eyes, they were a dull, lifeless gray. A perfect reflection of the curse that had turned his life into an empty canvas. He was talking to a woman, a beautiful werewolf with kind eyes and a warm smile. She reached out to touch his arm, and he flinched, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, but I saw it. The curse didn't just affect his emotions. It made physical contact painful, a jarring shock to his system. I felt a surge of pity, a warm, foreign feeling that threatened to overwhelm me. This wasn't the monster my mother had described. This was a man, a victim, trapped in a cage of her making. I took a deep breath, the cold night air filling my lungs. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about healing. About righting a terrible wrong. I started to move toward him, the vial clutched tightly in my hand. My movements were slow, deliberate, each step a testament to the 10 years I had spent living in hiding. I was a phantom, a whisper in the night. No one saw me. No one heard me. Not until I was almost upon him. Suddenly, a hand clamped over my mouth, and another wrapped around my waist, pulling me backward into the darkness. I struggled, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, but the grip was unyielding. My vial slipped from my fingers, the glass shattering against a rock with a soft, final tinkle. The sound, so small, was a universe of disappointment. I was dragged further into the shadows, a silent, struggling captive. I was thrown to the ground, my body hitting the hard earth with a jarring thud. The man who held me, a large, burly werewolf with a scar running down his cheek, sneered at me. "Look what I found, Alpha," he growled, his voice a low rumble. A stray omega, sniffing around. Luther turned, his lifeless eyes falling upon me. They held no recognition, no curiosity, only a blank, impassive stare. The scar-faced werewolf, whose name I later learned was Reese, pushed me to my knees. I looked up at Luther, my heart in my throat. This was it. The moment I had been working toward my entire life, and I had failed. Luther said nothing. He just stared at me, his gaze as cold and empty as a winter sky. Reese laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "What do you want to do with her, Alpha? The Omega Healer's scent is all over her. She's probably a spy." I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "I'm not a spy," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm a healer. And I have the cure for your curse." Reese's laughter grew louder. "The cure? From an Omega? Don't make me laugh." Luther held up a hand, and Reese fell silent. For the first time, Luther spoke, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that sent a shiver down my spine. "What did you say?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. "I have the cure for your curse," I repeated, my gaze unwavering. "A curse my mother placed on you a decade ago." A flicker, a ghost of an emotion, passed through his eyes. It was gone in an instant, replaced by that same cold, hollow gaze. He didn't believe me. Why would he? He knew nothing of my family, nothing of the curse's origin. He had lived with this emptiness for so long, it had become his normal. "You're lying," he said, his voice flat. "My father would have told me about this." "Your father was a cruel man," I shot back, the words coming out before I could stop them. "He hated my family, and he wiped us out. The curse was my mother's final act of vengeance." Luther took a step forward, his presence a dark, suffocating weight. "My father was a just man," he said, his voice a low growl. "He did what he had to do to protect his pack from rogue magic users." I shook my head, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "Your father was a monster. He didn't just kill my family. He tortured them. He enjoyed it." The words were a bitter truth, a stone in my throat. He stared at me, and I could almost feel the silent scream of a man trapped in his own body. He had no memory of that day, no feelings of hatred toward my family. All he had was the hollow ache of the curse. Suddenly, he turned his back on me, his broad shoulders a wall of indifference. "Take her to the dungeons," he commanded. "She's a prisoner now. She can heal the pack's sick and wounded. She'll earn her keep." Reese grabbed my arm, his grip like a steel vise. I was dragged away, my heart in a million pieces. The cure was gone. My life's work was gone. And I was a prisoner of the very man I had come to save. The celebration continued, the laughter and music a cruel soundtrack to my despair. I was a ghost in their midst, a prisoner in a land of light. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was only the beginning of my torment. Chapter 1. I was shoved into the cold, dark cell. The heavy iron door clanged shut behind me, the sound echoing a final, chilling punctuation to my failure. My body ached from the hard fall I'd taken. My hands, still trembling from the shock, were empty. The cure, my life's purpose, was a shattered memory on the forest floor. I was a healer without a cure, a purpose without a home. Hours passed. Or maybe it was days. Down in the dungeons, there was no sun to mark the passage of time, only the constant, oppressive chill and the faint, unsettling sounds of a place meant to contain secrets and pain. Reese, the pack warrior who had captured me, had been a blur of anger and disdain. He had called me a liar, a spy, an omega too bold for her own good. He hadn't bothered to give me any food or water. My throat was dry, and a hollow ache had settled in my stomach. The humiliation was a deeper kind of hunger. I sat huddled on a thin layer of straw, my back against the cold stone wall, replaying the scene in the forest over and over. I had been so close. So close to ending the curse. To freeing him. To freeing myself. I closed my eyes and saw the dull, lifeless gaze of Luther. I felt the absence of warmth when he touched my hand. He truly didn't believe in the curse, or in me. He had lived in this emotional wasteland for so long that he saw it as normal. That was the curse's true victory. It had stolen not just his feelings, but his very understanding of what it meant to be whole. The sound of footsteps approaching the dungeon door was the first new sound I'd heard in what felt like an eternity. The rhythmic thud was firm, deliberate, and undeniably powerful. The door creaked open, and light, for the first time, spilled into the gloom. It wasn't Reese. It was him. Luther. He walked toward my cell, his large form a silhouette against the light. His presence was a palpable thing, a heavy weight in the air that stole the breath from my lungs. He was dressed in a simple, dark tunic, but it did little to soften his formidable aura. He stopped in front of the bars of my cell, his hands on his hips. The scent of him, pine, earth, and that uniquely musky scent of a powerful alpha, filled the small space. My heart hammered against my ribs, a panicked drum against the silence. He said nothing for a long moment, his hollow eyes studying me. They held no recognition, no anger, no curiosity. Just a blank, impassive stare that made me feel utterly insignificant. "Tell me again," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. It was a command, not a request. "Who are you, and why did you come here?" His voice was a cold, flat thing, devoid of any inflection. It was the voice of a man who had forgotten how to feel. I swallowed, my throat dry. "My name is Jane," I said, the words a raw whisper. "And I'm a healer. The last of a lineage your father wiped out." He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing slightly, but I felt no emotion from him, just a chilling, analytical gaze. "You said you had a cure," he said, his voice as sharp and cold as a shard of ice. "Where is it?" I looked down at my hands, now clenched into fists. "Your warrior, Reese, he accidentally knocked it from my hand when he grabbed me. It shattered on the ground." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. He didn't believe me. I knew it. He saw it as a desperate lie from a captured enemy. "So," he said, his voice flat. "You came all this way. You claim to have the cure for a curse you say my mother placed on me. And now you say it's gone." He let out a humorless sigh. "You are an inefficient liar." "I'm not lying," I said, my voice rising in a frantic plea. "Your father, he tortured my family. He was merciless. My mother, with her dying breath, cursed you. It was her last act of vengeance. A flicker of something, a ghost of a memory, perhaps, or just the light catching in his eyes, passed through him. My father was a just man, he said, his voice a low growl. He did what was right for his pack. He was a monster, I insisted, the words of bitter truth. He wiped out my entire family. He left me, a child, to fend for myself in a world that hated me. I have lived my whole life in the shadows, hunted for the magic I didn't even choose to have. He stared at me, his gaze unchanging. I could almost feel the silent scream of a man trapped in his own body. He had no memory of that day, no feelings of hatred toward my family. All he had was the hollow ache of the curse. Suddenly, he turned away from my cell, his broad shoulders a wall of indifference. Useless, he said, his voice almost a whisper. You are useless to me without that cure. My heart sank. My life's purpose, gone. All that pain, all that hiding, all that loneliness, for nothing. He stopped at the dungeon door, his hand on the metal handle. The pack is in need of a healer, he said, his voice flat. My people have been suffering for too long without one. You will stay here. You will heal them. And you will earn your keep. I looked up, my eyes wide with disbelief. You want me to heal your pack? You are a healer, he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. You will heal. It's what you were born to do. The Red Claw Pack has a new healer. And you will begin your duties tomorrow. The words were a cold, final decree. I was no longer Jane, the last of a line of healers. I was his prisoner. I was his healer. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my purpose was no longer to heal him, but to heal the very people who hated me, all while living under the watchful, hollow gaze of the man who had no idea I was the one who cursed him in the first place. Chapter 2. Life in the pack was a constant struggle. I was an outsider, a ghost in their midst. My prison cell had been replaced by a small, windowless room in the pack infirmary, a change that was only a small improvement. The feeling of being trapped remained, and I had simply traded stone walls for the invisible but just as unyielding bars of suspicion and contempt. The pack members treated me with a mix of disdain and suspicion. Their eyes followed me wherever I went, their gazes as cold and hard as the stones of the dungeon. They called me the prisoner or the Omega healer, never by my name. I was a tool, a means to an end. My days were a cycle of silence and servitude. I was led from my room to the infirmary each morning by a warrior with a scowl etched on his face, and I was locked in again at night. In the infirmary, the pack members came and went. Most were silent, their faces a mask of suspicion. They would present a wounded arm or a feverish child, and I would do my work. My healing magic was like a well of pure, warm light inside me, a core of power that pulsed with every beat of my heart. I had to touch them to heal them, and at first, they flinched from my touch, their bodies tensing with distrust. But then they would feel it, the warm, pulsing glow of life returning to them, the pain fading away, bones knitting together with a soft, audible click. The relief in their eyes was the only thank you I ever received, a fleeting moment of human connection in a sea of isolation. I could feel their life force in my hands, a warm, pulsing glow that felt like a vibrant, humming melody. It was the music of life, and I was its conductor. But then there was Luther. He was a different kind of song. I saw him every day. He would walk through the infirmary, his presence a silent storm. He never spoke to me. He never looked at me. His gaze would pass over me as if I were a piece of furniture, a silent witness to his brokenness. I could feel the cold, hardened out of the curse in his chest, a black hole that sucked the warmth out of him whenever he was near. It was a constant reminder of my failure, of my mother's legacy. It was a silent accusation, a chilling presence that made my skin prickle with a constant, low-level dread. The curse was a silent shackle, a cage of nothingness that had consumed him from the inside out. He had no emotions to express, no feelings to betray. He was a perfect vacuum. I could almost feel his ghost-like existence, the heavy, dead weight of his heart. It was a constant, gnawing presence, a part of my own existence now, as much as my own heartbeat. It was the curse's true victory. It had stolen not just his feelings, but his very understanding of what it meant to be whole. And I, the one who had come to save him, was now a daily witness to his slow, silent death. One evening, the infirmary was plunged into a new kind of chaos. A little girl, Lily, had fallen from a tree and broken her arm. The bone was jagged, a sickening angle beneath her skin. Her face was a mask of pain and fear, her small body trembling with shock. The pack members who brought her in were in a frenzy, their worried whispers a low roar in the room. I felt drawn to her, her pain a siren's call to my healing hands. Her life force was a small, flickering flame, threatened by the darkness of her injury. I knew I had to help her. I knelt beside her, my hands hovering over her arm. Her mother, a tall, fierce woman with a worried expression, tried to pull her away. "Don't touch her, you witch," she snarled, her voice a low growl. But Lily, in her pain, looked at me with trusting, tear-filled eyes. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The simple plea was a direct hit to my heart. I placed my hands on her small arm, a soft, warm glow enveloping her. The light was like a second skin, a comforting blanket. I felt the jagged edges of the bone, the torn muscles, the bruised tissue. With a gentle focus of my magic, I guided the bone back into place, the torn tissue knitting together, the pain ebbing away. The whole process took only a few moments. When I lifted my hands, the light faded, and Lily's arm was whole. She moved her fingers, a look of wonder on her face. Her mother gasped, a hand over her mouth, her fierce demeanor replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. In the midst of the healing, a new sensation rippled through me. A tiny spark of warmth, not from me, but from the edge of the room. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a single ember in the freezing cold. I looked up and saw Luther standing there. He was looking at me, his eyes fixed on my hands, on the place where the light had just been. He wasn't looking through me anymore. He was watching me. And for the first time since I'd been captured, I felt seen. He said nothing, just turned and walked away. But the flicker of warmth lingered in the air, a faint, lingering promise. It was the first time I had felt anything from him besides the chilling emptiness of the curse. It was a tiny crack in the wall, a single ray of sun in a cold, dark room. The next day, the small, silent acts of change began. I was brought a proper meal, not just a plate of scraps, but a full, steaming bowl of stew and a warm loaf of bread. The pack members still watched me with suspicion, but there was a subtle shift in their gazes. There was a flicker of acceptance, a hesitant thawing of the ice. They had seen what I could do. They had seen me heal Lily, a child they all loved. They had seen the impossible, and the trust in their eyes, however small, was a weight I hadn't realized I was missing. My life in the pack continued. I healed, I worked, I kept to myself. But every day, I felt his gaze. Sometimes, he would come to the infirmary and just watch me, his presence a silent weight. I never spoke to him. He never spoke to me. But the air between us was no longer cold and empty. It was filled with a strange, crackling tension, a silent conversation between the healer who cursed him and the man who was now a victim of her legacy. We were two broken people, bound by a history neither of us had chosen. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was only the beginning of our story. Chapter 3. As the days turned into weeks, I began to see the cracks in his armor. The cold, blank slate I had first met was not as impenetrable as I had thought. My life in the pack had settled into a routine, healing the sick, enduring the cold glares, and feeling the constant, watchful gaze of Luther. He was a silent shadow, a presence I had become accustomed to, but now that presence felt different. It was no longer just the hollow emptiness of the curse, it was something else, something I couldn't quite name. I saw him alone in his study late at night, the only light coming from a single lamp. I would pass by on my way to my room, and the door would be slightly ajar. I would stop, my heart thumping, and watch him from the hallway. He wasn't working. He was just sitting there, staring at an old, faded photograph. I couldn't make out the details, but the edges were soft with age, and the paper was a pale yellow. It was a picture of a family. A man, a woman, and a young boy who looked just like him. He would just stare at it, his face a perfect mask of stillness. But I saw the faintest, almost imperceptible lines of grief etched on his face, lines that had nothing to do with age. They were the marks of a man who felt a deep sense of loss, but couldn't remember why. I also saw the way his eyes followed Lily. I would see him in the training yard, his attention focused on his warriors, but when Lily would run past, he would turn his head, just for a moment, his gaze soft. He would never smile, never reach out, but the warmth I had felt from him in the infirmary was there again, a tiny, glowing ember in the cold. It was a painful kind of warmth, the warmth of a man who knows what love feels like but can't remember it. He also had a strange habit of looking at the sky. He would stand on the balcony of his office, his head tilted back, and he would just sigh, a long, low sound that was filled with a weary sadness. He was a man who felt, but the curse had muted his emotions to a dull throb. It was like he was a broken radio, his emotions a faint, distorted signal he could barely make out. I felt a growing sense of empathy for him. He wasn't the monster I had imagined. He was a victim of my family's legacy. He had been a child when my mother had cursed him. A child who had grown into a man robbed of his heart, of his memories, of his very soul. One day, while I was cleaning the infirmary, I found an old, leather-bound journal tucked away in a dusty corner. I opened it, my heart pounding with a mix of curiosity and guilt. It was his mother's journal. I knew her name, Luna, from the photo I had seen him staring at. As I read her words, a new understanding of the curse began to unfold. Her journal entries spoke of her family's love, her husband's strength, and her son's happiness. The entries stopped abruptly a decade ago, but the pages before were filled with her love for her son, Luther, and her husband, the Alpha. She wrote about the fear she had felt when they had to deal with the rogue healers, my family. She had been worried about her husband's ruthless methods, but she had trusted him to do what was right for the pack. The last entry was a plea, a prayer for her family's safety. My stomach twisted with guilt. The curse wasn't just a curse on him. It was a curse on his family, a family that had suffered and died because of my lineage. He had once made a promise to his mother that he would love his mate, that he would be a loving, compassionate man. A promise the curse would never let him keep. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. The guilt was a physical weight in my chest. He was a victim. His family had been victims. The narrative my mother had drilled into me my entire life, that they were monsters, that my family had been heroes, was a lie. Or at least, it was only half the truth. My mother, in her dying breath, had not only cursed Luther, she had sealed a cycle of pain that had haunted both of our families. I realized then that my mission was not just about breaking a curse. It was about righting a terrible wrong. It was about offering a form of peace, of redemption, to a man who had been paying the price for a feud he had no part in. My hands, once meant to simply heal, now felt a new purpose. A purpose of mending, of rebuilding, of offering a new path forward. I had come to heal him, but I now understood that he was a victim of my family's legacy. I felt a growing sense of empathy for him. He isn't the monster I imagined. He is a victim of my family's legacy. My heart, once cold and guarded, now ached for him. It ached for the little boy in the photograph. It ached for the man who was forced to live without a heart. And I, the last of my kind, knew that my true purpose had nothing to do with revenge, but everything to do with setting his heart free. Chapter 4. The pack was getting antsy. The low rumble of discontent was a constant, unsettling presence in the air, a sound I had come to recognize as a precursor to trouble. It had started with the elders, old, weathered werewolves who clung to tradition like a lifeline. They would corner Luther after pack meetings, their voices low but their disapproval clear. An alpha without a mate is an incomplete alpha, they would whisper. They spoke of the pack's vulnerability, of the need for a Luna to balance his power, to bring warmth to the cold, hollow space where his heart should be. I knew the truth, but I said nothing. The whispers grew louder, the gazes more pointed. They looked at Luther with a mixture of pity and frustration, and they looked at me with a dangerous new level of suspicion, as if I were somehow the cause of his brokenness. I was still a ghost in their midst, but now I was a ghost they were beginning to notice, a living, breathing symbol of their alpha's strange and unsettling condition. One brisk morning, a large group of us was sent on a hunting expedition into the dense northern woods. It was a mission meant to stock the pack's larder for the coming winter. I was there, of course, because of my healing abilities. The elders had insisted. Injuries were common on hunts, and having a healer on hand was a smart move, even if I was a prisoner. The woods were quiet, the ground covered with a fresh dusting of snow. The air was cold and crisp, and the scent of pine and damp earth filled my lungs. The pack moved through the trees, a silent, efficient force, their senses tuned to the slightest sound, the faintest scent. I followed along, my own senses on high alert, my magical warmth from under my skin, ready to leap to the aid of a wounded warrior. In the chaos of the hunt, Luther and I found ourselves separated from the others. We had been trailing a large stag, a magnificent creature with a massive rack of antlers, and in the chase, we had moved deeper into the quiet, snow-covered forest, our focus on the hunt. The stag was fast, and the chase was long. When we finally stopped, panting, the stag had gotten away, and the sounds of the other hunters had faded into the distance, leaving us in a world of silence. It was a silence different from the one we shared in the infirmary. It was not a silence of avoidance, but a silence of two people, two souls, alone in a vast, empty landscape. The air was thick with tension, but not with the coldness of the curse. It was a different kind of tension, a kind of nervous energy that hummed between us, a silent question waiting to be asked. We didn't speak for a long time. I just stood there, my breath a white cloud in the cold air, my heart beating a soft, nervous rhythm against my ribs. I could feel his presence, his immense power, his calm, and something else, a deep, weary sadness that was so palpable it was almost physical. He finally spoke, his voice a low, rough sound that cut through the silence. "The pack is worried," he said, his eyes focused on the trees. "They want me to find a mate. They think I'm broken. They think I'm weak. I said nothing, just looked at him, my eyes wide. He had never spoken to me about his feelings before. This was new and dangerous territory. He let out a short, humorless laugh that held no joy, only a bitter truth. I am broken. And I am weak. The curse, it's a constant, silent war in my mind. I see them, my pack, my people. I know I should feel a fierce loyalty, a deep love for them. I know I should be happy when they celebrate. I know I should grieve when they mourn. But all I feel is nothing. Just a dull throb. Like a phantom limb. I'm a puppet. A ghost in my own life. A man who knows what he should feel but can't. He looked at me then, his eyes, for the first time, holding a flicker of pain. A raw, vulnerable emotion that was so unlike him it took my breath away. The curse has taken my heart. It's left me with nothing but this hollow ache. My own heart ached in response, a painful, physical thing. The words were a bitter truth. I had known it, of course, from the moment I first saw him, but hearing him say it, it was a new kind of pain. It was the sound of a man drowning in an ocean of nothingness. I understand, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I understand what it's like to be a prisoner of your own power. He looked at me, his head tilted, a silent question in his eyes. I took a deep breath, the cold air burning my lungs. My mother, she was a powerful healer. But she was also a prisoner of her power. She couldn't stop. She couldn't let go. She couldn't forgive. I looked at him, my eyes filled with unshed tears. She hated your father so much, she let that hatred consume her. The curse, it was the last thing she had left. She sacrificed her own soul to take yours. I felt the weight of my family's past, the burden of a legacy I didn't choose, settle on my shoulders. The price of my own powers. I've been paying it my whole life. The pack, my own kind, they hunted me for my magic. They saw me as a threat, an abomination. I was alone. Always alone. He took a step closer to me, his presence a warm, comforting weight in the cold. We were no longer Alpha and Omega, prisoner and captor. We were two people, two souls, bound by a shared burden. He was a victim of my family's legacy, and I was a victim of his family's hatred. We were two sides of the same coin, two broken pieces of a whole that had been shattered a decade ago. You're not alone now, he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. It wasn't a promise, but it felt like one. It was a simple statement of fact, a truth that resonated deep within me. For the first time, I felt a sense of belonging, a fragile but undeniable connection to another person. The sound of the pack horn broke the spell. It was the signal to return to the rendezvous point. We looked at each other, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes that wasn't hope or pain. It was a flicker of something more. A fragile, budding thing. Trust. We walked back to the main hunting party, the distance between us no longer a vast, empty space, but a quiet, comfortable closeness. The silence was no longer a sign of our brokenness, but a shared understanding, a new beginning. Chapter 5. We were ambushed on our way back to the main hunting party. The return journey had been quiet and peaceful, a soft, hushed conversation between two souls who had finally found a moment of understanding. The cold silence between us had been replaced by a comfortable closeness, a quiet understanding that passed between us in unspoken glances and subtle gestures. The pack was tired but content, their backs laden with the day's spoils. The air was colder now, the sun beginning to set, casting long, purple shadows across the snow. We were walking at the back of the group, not by a conscious decision, but by a natural pull that kept us a little apart from the others. He didn't look at me, but I could feel his presence, a warm, solid weight that was a comfort I hadn't realized I had come to rely on. The silence was not empty. It was filled with a quiet, humming energy, a new kind of magic. We had just crested a small rise, the trees thinning slightly, when the world exploded. It was a sudden, violent eruption of snarling, screaming, and the brutal sounds of fighting. A rival pack, out for blood, had been waiting for us. They had moved silently, their forms a blur of gray and brown against the trees, their eyes cold with a hungry malevolence that was both terrifying and familiar. Their leader, a massive, scarred alpha with a cruel sneer, stepped out from behind a tree, his eyes fixed on Luther. The ambush was not a hunt for food. It was a hunt for our alpha, a calculated act of war meant to tear the heart out of the Red Claw pack. The fight was a maelstrom of violence. Our small group was outnumbered, but our warriors were strong. They fought with a desperate ferocity, a loyalty to their alpha that was fierce and unwavering. I was shoved to the side, my role as a healer kicking in, my mind racing as I took in the chaos around me. The woods filled with the sounds of snapping teeth and tearing flesh. The air filled with the coppery smell of blood and the sharp scent of fear. I was a healer, not a warrior. I was a life giver in a place of death, and for a moment, I felt paralyzed, a deer in the headlights. The sight of so much pain and anger was a physical blow, a weight that threatened to crush me. But then I saw it. One of our warriors, a young, fierce woman I had healed just a few days ago, had her leg ripped open. She fell, a cry of pain escaping her lips. I didn't think. I just acted. I ran to her, my hands hovering over her wound. I felt the warm, pulsing glow of her life force, and I focused my magic, pushing all my energy into mending her torn flesh, the wound sealing itself up as I worked. I moved from warrior to warrior, my magic a frantic, warm light in the cold chaos. I healed a broken arm, a deep gash on a man's chest, a sprained ankle. The magic was a part of me, a natural instinct, a frantic, desperate river of light. It was exhausting, each act of healing draining a piece of my own energy, but I couldn't stop. They were his pack, and for a reason I was just beginning to understand, they were now a part of me, too. I was working on a warrior with a nasty gash on his side when I saw it. A blade, a long, glinting piece of metal, was aimed straight at Luther. He was battling two wolves at once, his back to the attacker. He was a force of nature, a blur of motion and power, but he was outnumbered and distracted. He couldn't see the blade, couldn't see the danger. My heart leaped into my throat. The world seemed to slow down, the sounds of fighting fading to a distant hum, the world narrowing to just Luther and the glinting blade. I didn't think. I just acted. My body moved on its own, a frantic, desperate prayer of a movement. I threw myself in front of him. It wasn't a choice. It was an instinct, a primal, unyielding need to protect him. The blade sank into my side. A white-hot agony washed over me, a blinding pain that stole the breath from my lungs. It was a sharp, searing pain, a fire that consumed me from the inside out. My legs gave out. I crumpled to the ground, a single, choked gasp escaping my lips. As I fell, the world began to spin. The cold, dark earth rushed up to meet me, but I didn't hit it. He caught me, his arms a tight vice around my body, his body a solid wall that sheltered me from the chaos around us. I looked up, and I saw his eyes. He had turned, just in time to see me fall. For the first time, I saw raw, unfiltered emotion. Panic. Fear. His eyes were wide, and the dead, hollow emptiness was gone, replaced by a storm of feeling so intense it was almost a color. He was a man who felt again, and the first thing he felt was me. He was yelling my name, a frantic, broken cry that was filled with a pain that was so real, so raw, that it made my heart ache. His heart was pounding, a frantic, desperate rhythm against my chest. As he held me tight, I could feel it. The cold knot, the curse, it was unraveling. It was breaking. It was dissolving. The ice around his heart was melting, and a warm, vibrant light was blooming in his chest, filling the emptiness, flooding his soul. It was a beautiful, agonizing process. The pain from my wound was a searing flame, but the warmth of his love was a comforting blanket that wrapped around me, a new, gentle force that was so much more powerful than the pain. He held me, his arms a tight, desperate vice, and I felt it. The cold knot was gone. The black hole was gone. He was a man who felt again, and the first thing he felt was me. The pain, the fear, the frantic, desperate love, it was all there, a torrent of emotion that had been locked away for a decade, now finally set free. The love wasn't a magical gift, it was a choice to feel, a choice to heal. I, the last of my kind, had come here to break a curse, and in doing so, I had found my home. He looked at me, his eyes full of a warmth I never knew he possessed, and for the first time, he smiled. It was a shaky, fragile thing, but it was there, a promise of a new life, a new beginning. Epilogue. I woke up in a large, comfortable bed in his home. The first thing I felt was not the searing pain from my wound, but a gentle, comforting weight. He was by my side, his hand in mine, his thumb tracing soft circles on my palm. The room was warm, filled with the scent of pine in him, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly safe. I looked at him, and my breath caught in my throat. His eyes, once a dull, lifeless gray, were now a warm, vibrant blue, filled with a depth and a kindness I had never seen before. He looked at me, his gaze full of a warmth I never knew he possessed, and for the first time, he smiled. It was a shaky, fragile thing, but it was there, a perfect reflection of the love that was now flowing through him. "I love you, Jane," he said, his voice a low, rough rumble that was filled with an emotion so raw and beautiful it brought tears to my eyes. "I love you." I didn't know what it was, but it was there, a constant ache, a feeling that I was missing something. But when I saw you fall, when I saw the blade, all the feelings rushed back at once. Panic. Fear. And then, you. You were the first thing I felt. He brought my hand to his lips and kissed my palm, a soft, tender gesture that sent a jolt of warmth through my body. "The curse is gone," he said, "but the love is not a magical gift. It is a choice. A choice to heal, to love, to feel. You didn't just break the curse, Jane. You set my heart free. You showed me that even in the darkest places, there can be light. And I want to spend the rest of my life making you feel as seen and as loved as you have made me." He got down on one knee, his eyes never leaving mine, and he pulled a small, velvet box from his pocket. He opened it, revealing a ring with a single, stunning diamond. "I, Luther of the Red Claw Pack, have found my mate. I have found my healer. I have found the woman who set my heart free. Will you marry me, Jane? Will you be my Luna?" The tears streamed down my face, a silent river of joy. "Yes," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, I will. He slid the ring onto my finger, and it was a perfect fit. He held my hand to his heart, and I could feel its strong, steady beat. A heart that was no longer sealed by a curse, but was now filled with love, a love that was a testament to the power of forgiveness, the strength of the human spirit, and the beauty of two broken souls finally finding their home. The end.
The curse is broken. The Alpha's heart is free. But with new love comes new enemies. When a long-lost secret from Jane's past emerges, the fragile piece of the Red Claw pack is shattered. A rival lineage of healers, older and more powerful than her own, believes she has stolen their rightful magic. They want the power she possesses, and they'll tear the pack apart to get it. Now, with a mate who is just beginning to understand his feelings and a pack who is just beginning to trust her, Jane must face a choice: give up her powers to save the pack or fight to protect the home and love she has finally found. In the next chapter of their story, love isn't just a feeling. It's the ultimate weapon. Don't miss a moment of their journey. If you love Jane and Luther's story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Hit the bell icon to turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when the sequel drops, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Let me know in the comments below what you're most excited to see in the sequel.